So what we've seen so far here from Fire Emblem Engage is that this game is not going anywhere. People were kind of questioning exactly how it would respond or how it would perform on the market, considering it's not one of the newer titles that kind of push the social features and some of the other things that the more recent Fire Emblem games have been doing. And the response has been absolutely incredible according to what we're going to be talking about here on the Nintendo Switch eShop charts. So the Switch eShop charts for February 4th, 2023 is notable because Fire Emblem Engage is still the top selling game on there. Now the game did come out about 2 weeks ago as of the time that I'm recording this video. So for 2 solid weeks and even a little bit before the game launched as well, Fire Emblem Engage has been the best selling game on a system that has 100 million plus people that have the system, with millions of active users that are out there buying games on the eShop. So this is absolutely an incredible and great sign for Fire Emblem Engage, and it shows that the concept that they were going for really worked. But I think the biggest thing that this shows is that there's probably a lot of people that are brand new or that are just dipping their feet into the Fire Emblem universe. There's probably a lot of people out there, especially based on the comments that I read all the time on all of my Fire Emblem videos, where a lot of you guys have maybe played like one Fire Emblem game or haven't really played too much of Three Houses, or maybe Three Houses was your first one and you went back in for another Fire Emblem game. So Engage is always kind of risky, that style of game where you do like an anniversary game with tons of different characters and a lot of plot points, or at least stuff from different games. If you don't know that game, then you're not going to necessarily understand everything. But I think that Fire Emblem Engage has only enhanced the value of the Fire Emblem brand and have gotten more people interested in Fire Emblem overall. And on top of that, it's an incredible game. Certain games that come out on the eShop and they do well, first party games, sometimes you'll see them drop off kind of quickly because maybe the game isn't that great, or maybe that there's some issues with the game. But when it comes to a game like Fire Emblem that isn't the most popular that Nintendo has, and for it to hold its spot for 2 weeks plus on the eShop, that goes to show you that word of mouth for Fire Emblem Engage is incredibly strong, because I guarantee you if the word of mouth for this game wasn't good, people wouldn't still be buying it. And I think that people are seeing the videos and seeing the different stuff out there and the gameplay clips, and more people are getting into Fire Emblem. So this just makes me extremely happy, and it shows the direction for the game when it comes to what they did with the characters and some of the controversy there, what they did with the story and the gameplay. I think it was the right call. Now we still have to wait and see exactly how it's going to do compared to Fire Emblem Three Houses and overall what's going on there. But I don't think Fire Emblem Three Houses, at least compared to Fire Emblem Engage, I think that Engage was a much cheaper title to produce, considering everything that Fire Emblem Three Houses did and the fact that they actually had to go through Koei Tecmo in order to get a game that massive done, whereas Engage is a singular title with a singular focus. It does not have 3 separate paths and all the different things that it does. So I feel that Engage was more smartly designed in terms of a focus and what they want to do, and they're reaping the rewards of that. And of course, as a massive Fire Emblem fan myself, it was pretty incredible that they're able to pull off something like this. I'm just happy for the team, happy for Intelligent Systems that they're able to make an anniversary game and it be very successful and very fun to play. I think this is probably the most peak in terms of Fire Emblem UI, Fire Emblem graphics, Fire Emblem gameplay that we've seen so far. It is a really good game that has tons of depth and a lot of hidden depth in there with the online multiplayer and also with the downloadable maps and some of the customization features. It really kind of layers on quite a number of things to get you hooked and to get you interested and to keep you playing even after you're done beating the game. You can go into the tower trials and have fun there as well. So as a Fire Emblem fan, you're gonna be like, hey, look, I can go back to this whenever I want and try out new difficult maps or play my friends' maps. So I think that it was just something that was put together from people who have perfected the strategy RPG overall. To me, Fire Emblem is at the top of the top, and we really don't get AAA or big strategy RPG games quite a bit that are this popular. So to see a game to come out and it's this popular and it's doing this well, that's something awesome, because even a game like Marvel Midnight Suns came out on PlayStation and Xbox and it was almost kind of forgotten. I didn't see it really top any of the charts. I didn't really see where it was going. It seems like people just forgot about that game, and that's using the Marvel license that is developed by Firaxis, the developers behind XCOM, one of the original incredible strategy RPGs out there with XCOM, and it seems like it was just forgotten and lost under God of War and all the different games that came out for the fall. So interesting to see that Fire Emblem Engage is still out there. People are enjoying it. I'm having people come to my stream every single time and say, hey, OJ, I finally got into Fire Emblem because of you, and I'm loving this game. There's this and that about it. I like this. And we talk about strategies, and we talk about different emblems that you can use and all the different type of stuff on my streams all the time. So it's just beautiful to see, and I'm very excited to see the future of Fire Emblem and what they do, especially with Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War Remake that's been heavily rumored to be a title that is pretty much done or is coming out. So that is a remake of Fire Emblem 4, one of the most controversial Fire Emblem games of all time. And I actually did a video on it discussing. So if you haven't seen that, please check it out. I'll have a link to it in the description below. But I want to talk about something else that we need to check out, because this is a discussion that we had recently on one of my streams about the Switch difference with AA Japanese games and why sometimes, despite what people might think, it might be better for you if you have a AA Japanese game, one of those core Japanese titles out there. Not the biggest, not like Final Fantasy or whatever the case is, but if you have one of these games like Raincoat, it might be a smart idea to make it a Switch exclusive, considering the market today. And there are a number of examples that we're going to talk about in this interview. Now, in my stream the other week, we talked about this with Neo, The World Ends With You, and how that game didn't necessarily do as well. And part of that potentially could have been, at least the chat was saying, because it wasn't a Switch exclusive, and it kind of lost that marketing oomph, that marketing bump that you get. And I was kind of like, yeah, maybe it could be that, because if you compare it to some Square Enix's other titles that are Switch exclusives, those did considerably better, and it had right around the same amount of marketing, but you get the Nintendo Direct bump. And on top of that, games like The World Ends With You, the game that came out on the Nintendo Switch, the first game, that I think did better than the second game when it comes to Neo, The World Ends With You. But let's talk about this, because the game in question here is Master Detective Archives Raincoat, and the developer talked about making it a Switch exclusive, and a lot of these things that I just talked about here was brought up, and this is from officially, like, business-wise, obviously millions of dollars on the line here. Now, this interview was published a while back, and we're going to go over what was said here. And this was talking to a Master Detective Archives Raincoat writer, Mr. Kodaka. He spoke with them and had this to say. So first off, Kodaka says, the response from overseas has been great. There's already things like fan art. It's not easy to reach a wide range of people with the initial announcement, so Nintendo Directs are great. We talked about potentially making it multi-platform before, but this announcement made me realize the effect of narrowing it down to one platform. It would be a different story with a AAA title, but there are so many AA and A titles that it would get buried if it were multi-platform. It was Spike Chunsoft who made the decision to make it Switch only, and I think it was a wise one. Now we're going to continue on here before we kind of get into that first block of what he had to say. A common pattern I see with successful indie games is to release as Steam exclusive, climb the Steam rankings, be noticed by new people that way. The same can be said with Switch. Climbing the Switch rankings puts the game in front of a new audience to reach those who don't consume media. Climbing the rankings is just about the only opportunity. Now, Kodaka had this to say. Exactly. If we made it multi-platform, it would certainly be buried and lost. Now, here's the next thing from the interview. Nintendo Direct has much more influence than State of Play, so that seems like an advantage of making it Switch only. Although developed by other companies, Nintendo Direct announced Triangle Strategy, while State of Play announced the Diofield Chronicle, both of which are Square Enix games with similar needs, and yet their sales numbers are completely different. I don't think that's an issue with the games themselves. It seems like a difference in promotion from my outside perspective. Now, Kodaka responded with this. Another factor in our decision to release it for Switch was that it's an adventure game. Kodaka also added this. Another factor in our decision to release it for the Switch was that it's an adventure game. I think if another company decided to make a new IP for the Switch, they would have had a hard time if it were mainly CGI because of the Switch's hardware limitations. we were able to make Rancode because it focuses mainly on the story. We're going to release more promotional videos, some of which will feature Mystery Labyrinth. So I hope the variety there catches people's interest. So Master Detective Archives Rancode will be launching on the Switch this spring. And there is a lot to unpack here in terms of what is said, but I think the gist of it all is that Nintendo directs in terms of the Switch itself and certain types of games, the certain types of AA RPGs or strategy RPGs. If you focus in, if you hone in on Switch and you get it into a Nintendo Direct and it's viewed by millions of people and it really vibes with the style of games that do well on Switch, you have a better opportunity to actually sell and be successful than potentially having a multi-platform game that doesn't get that Nintendo Direct focus because it's not an exclusive for the Switch. And it ends up just being kind of like, okay. And I think that's where what he was saying here, what they were talking about when it comes to the DioField Chronicle, that is a multi-platform game on multiple different systems. One was announced with Triangle Strategy at Nintendo Direct. The other was announced with the PlayStation State of Play. And ultimately, those went in different directions when it comes to sales numbers. I'm not even sure if the DioField Chronicle has surpassed Triangle Strategy, despite Triangle Strategy only being on one platform and DioField being on every single platform. I don't think it's passed up the sales because Square Enix announced that Triangle Strategy sold 800,000 units in like 2 to 3 weeks or so, over 1 million at this point, especially with the Steam release that came later down the line, although it didn't really do too well on Steam. But I think that people continue to buy Triangle Strategy on the Nintendo Switch. And on top of that, the announcement of it being at a Nintendo Direct and having the old school HD 2D, I think that all of that played a factor into it. Games like Live Alive as well. So if you have one of those core Japanese AA titles, it might be better off to just say, hey, look, let's just focus on the Switch. Let's get it into a Nintendo Direct. And we think that we can do better than potentially spreading your resources across all these different platforms and it not have a focus, because we've seen that quite a bit. Neo: The World Ends With You, if that game was just a Switch exclusive, it might have done better. It might have done better. Now, we don't have all the numbers in terms of things. Based off of what Square Enix has stated with the game, how it didn't reach expectations, I'm guessing that the game didn't do very well with Neo: The World Ends With You. If you compare that to The World Ends With You, the original game that came out on the Switch, it seems like that game did better than the sequel. And it's not better than the sequel, especially those controls on the Switch, but that Switch exclusive focus, I think that does something for your game. And I think that game was also announced at a Nintendo Direct Mini back in January 2018 with the original World Ends With You for the Nintendo Switch. So I think that there is something to what is being said here with Kodaka and just the discussion when it comes to different things with the Nintendo Switch and those type of games. We're seeing a lot of these strategy RPGs or different types of games have a lot of success if they just focus on the Nintendo Switch, obviously with that being exclusive, but we're just seeing it time and time again with various different titles. And it's a very interesting conversation to have because I think Switch reaches a different type of audience. And I think Kodaka pretty much summed it up pretty great here. Now, if this was a AAA title in terms of scope and scale and money, then yeah, you have to think about it a different way. You have to say, okay, multi-platform, because it costs so much to make these games, so it makes sense. But if it's not that, and if you look at what the Switch does, obviously from a hardware perspective, you're not going to get that same type of beef that you would need to appeal to that audience. But with the Nintendo Switch, you can make a game that looks like this, that runs like this, that plays like this, and have a lot of success. And they did, because I've never purchased a Danganronpa game at all, you know, not because I don't like it, it's just because it's not my style of game. But as soon as I saw that Rancode game, I went and pre-ordered the special edition. As soon as I saw it, if it was a multi-platform and maybe it didn't get as much publicity because of the Nintendo Direct, I'm not sure if I would have rushed out there and did the pre-order on that game. I'm not sure if I would have, because I didn't do that with a lot of other games, but with certain titles that really speak to what I like and it's at the Nintendo Directs, it's just great marketing when it comes down to it. And it seems like it's the same thing with lots of other people too, with the state of plays and stuff like that, because there's certain Japanese titles that come out on there that are more of the smaller games, and those don't really get much of play. But then some of the bigger stuff that stands out obviously has great marketing publicity for those as well. So I think that it works out all in all when it comes to various different types of what gamers want and everything. But I think that this is something that I wouldn't say is 100% fact at this point, but it's definitely moving towards like, hey, look, like this is kind of what's happening, because Triangle Strategy, obviously Fire Emblem Engage, there's a number of games that have sold better in terms of certain RPGs and stuff on the Switch platform over what Microsoft and Sony are doing with certain styles of Japanese games. But that's going to wrap it up for this video here, guys. Make sure you check out the link in the description below. We've got some videos that I did that I think that you guys would be interested in, especially if you're into Switch stuff like The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and why some big information is coming soon. Also some Nintendo Direct stuff possibly happening. Check it out, link in the description. It's all there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you for the next video. Peace.